Hey guys, we know you love these long 20-story videos and we love the feedback we get. However, it takes a while for our small team to make them. That's why we've moved over to a new channel, Wideawakehorror Extended, just for our long stories with a bigger team, and we will be uploading the longer stories from that channel from now on. So guys, please head over to our new channel and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new videos. The channel link will be in the video description and in the comments. And when we upload, comment that you're from the original Wide Awake Horror channel so we can appreciate you as one of the OG members. Thank you so much for being part of the Wide Awake Horror family. We hope to see you on our new channel. We love you guys.
I'm not sure what I expected when I broke up with Claudia, but I definitely didn't think it would end like this. Honestly, I thought it was a clean break. She'd be upset, sure, but I'd give her some space, and eventually we'd both move on. But Claudia, she didn't know how to handle rejection, not even a little bit. It all started the night I told her it was over. I'd been thinking about it for a while, but she'd started getting weird and possessive, texting me constantly, showing up at my place uninvited. At first, I tried to explain things calmly like, hey, I think we need some time apart, but she didn't take that well. She flipped, started crying, begging me to change my mind. It felt like I was trying to end things with a tornado. It was just too much, too fast. So I did what any rational person would do. I cut it off completely. No contact. No more late night texts. I even blocked her number, figuring that would help things die down. Big mistake. Huge mistake. At first, it was just little things. I'd come home to find eggs smeared all over my window. I thought it was some random prank, but then the next night it happened again, and the night after that. The same eggs, the same spot in the window. After the third night, I started getting paranoid. I'd check outside to see if there were any footprints or signs that someone had been there, but there was nothing. It didn't take long for me to figure out who was behind it, though. One day, I came home from work, and there was a small pile of dog poop in my mailbox. Not like a casual little dog poop either. No, this was an effort. It was wrapped in a plastic bag, then shoved into my mailbox. I didn't even know who had a dog that big in the neighborhood, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. The only person who had a reason to be so petty was Claudia. By this point, I wasn't just frustrated. I was legitimately worried. I changed my locks, installed some security cameras around the house, and made sure to always lock the windows. Still, it felt like no matter what I did, she found a way to make her presence known. I started getting pizza deliveries at my door, one after the other, like clockwork. I'd open the door, see the boxes piled up, and just know Claudia. It didn't make any sense at first. Who orders pizza for someone who doesn't want it? But that was her thing. She knew I liked pizza, so she figured if she couldn't have me, she'd at least make sure I was uncomfortable. It was like some sick game to her. The tipping point, though, the thing that made everything cross from annoying to terrifying, happened on a night I'll never forget. I'd been lying in bed, exhausted from a week of work, just trying to get some sleep. My phone had been buzzing all night, texts from random numbers, blocked calls, stuff I just ignored. I finally passed out around 2 a.m., dead to the world. Then I woke up. I don't know why or how, but something felt off. The room felt different. At first, I thought I was just dreaming, but when I opened my eyes, I saw her, Claudia, lying next to me, in my bed. My heart slammed in my chest, and for a second, I just stared at her, trying to process what was happening. I didn't even know how she'd gotten in. The back door was locked. The windows were locked. But there she was curled up next to me like she had every right to be there. I froze. I didn't know whether to scream, to jump out of bed, or to just pretend like I was still asleep. But when she shifted slightly, I could hear her breathing. Steady, calm, almost like she was waiting for me to wake up. I snapped out of it and shot up, my head spinning. I bolted for the door, but when I tried to open it, the handle wouldn't budge. She locked it from the inside. I turned back to the bed. She was sitting up now, her eyes wide and empty like nothing was wrong. I just stood there in complete shock, feeling the sudden weight in my stomach that made me feel like I was suffocating. I knew at that moment I couldn't just stand there. I needed to get out, now. I finally managed to get the door open. I ran straight for my phone. I didn't even think about it, didn't hesitate. I called the cops. The whole time, my hands were shaking, my voice cracking as I explained everything about the eggs, the dog poop, the pizzas, and now her breaking into my house in the middle of the night. The cops arrived pretty quickly, and they found her still in my house. Apparently, she'd slipped through a small window at the back that I'd forgotten to lock. I guess she'd been planning to stay the night because she had a pillow and a blanket with her. It was one of those things that's so ridiculous, it almost doesn't seem real. Like, how far do you have to be gone in your head to think that's okay? They arrested her, and I had to give a statement. The whole process felt like a blur. I remember sitting in my living room just completely drained, waiting for the cops to finish their work. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, like she was out there lurking somewhere, just waiting for the chance to do it all again. They told me she'd been stalking me for a while, that the pizza orders were just the tip of the iceberg. Apparently, she'd been driving past my place at odd hours trying to figure out when I'd be home, when I'd be gone. I was told she'd even asked around the neighborhood, trying to get personal details about me, where I worked, where I hung out. The cops said they'd be keeping an eye on her for a while, but they couldn't guarantee anything. The thing is, I still don't feel safe. Even now, I'm still paranoid. I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable in my own home again. And every time I hear a knock at the door or a car slow down outside, I find myself checking the security cameras just to make sure it's not her. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't called the cops that night. Maybe it was over for her. Maybe not. Either way, I've learned one thing for sure: you don't ever really know what someone is capable of until they showed you. And when they do, it's too late. So, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what happened. It feels like some messed up movie plot, but I swear to God, this was my life. A few months ago, my ex Darren, yeah, the same Darren I hadn't heard from in 10 years, just showed up at my doorstep. And not in the normal "I'm sorry for the past" way either. No, it was straight up disturbing. He didn't even care that I was married, had kids, and a whole life built with my husband, Kyle. He kept coming around, saying he was meant to be with me like nothing had changed. It was like my past suddenly came crashing into my present, and it wasn't pretty. Let me give you a little backstory first, just so you understand how crazy this whole thing was. Darren and I had been together for years. We were high school sweethearts, if you want to call it that. I thought I was in love, and I really thought he was the one. But looking back, I was just so caught up in the idea of him. He was controlling, manipulative, and made me feel like I couldn't breathe. The breakup came after a lot of drama. He started getting worse, showing up at my place unannounced, texting nonstop, making wild accusations that I was cheating when I wasn't even seeing anyone. So yeah, I ended it. Clean break, moved on. The usual. Fast forward 10 years. I'm married to Kyle, who's the complete opposite of Darren. Kyle is chill, understanding, and doesn't make everything about him. He's the kind of guy who can let me have a life outside of our relationship and not freak out about it. We have 2 kids now, a house, and everything I ever wanted in a family. I've barely thought about Darren in years, except for the occasional random memory of the mess we were. It was like Darren didn't even exist anymore. And then one day I get a message. At first, I didn't even recognize the number, but it was clear right away who it was. Darren. He said he wanted to talk, but I was busy. I was at work, running errands, doing mom things. I brushed it off like the thousands of other times people from the past try to pop back in. But this time, something felt off. He kept texting me and calling. Not normal texts, either. He was saying things like, "You know I'm still one for you. You can't deny it," or "You and Kyle aren't happy. I can make you happy again." I honestly thought it was some weird joke at first, but when I looked at the number, I knew it was him. I never responded, but I could feel my heart racing every time I saw a message pop up. I didn't want to tell Kyle at first. What was I going to say? Oh, hey, my psycho ex is texting me out of nowhere. But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something bad. Sure enough, the next week, Darren showed up at our house. Unannounced. At our front door, I wasn't home, but Kyle was. From what Kyle told me, Darren started knocking like a maniac, demanding to talk to me. When Kyle went to the door to ask him to leave, Darren started saying all this crap about how I was wasting my life with Kyle, that I belonged with him, and that Kyle wasn't good enough for me. Of course, Kyle told him to get lost, and that's when things took a turn. Darren wouldn't leave. Kyle called me in a panic, telling me Darren was being unhinged and that he was getting way too aggressive. I told him to just call the cops, but Kyle wasn't having it. He had enough. By the time I got home, the scene was something straight out of a bad reality show. Kyle was standing at the door. Darren was yelling at him from the porch, and I could hear the anger in Kyle's voice as he said he was done with this whole thing. Darren was just standing there, his eyes wide, like he was daring Kyle to make a move. And then Kyle did make a move. He grabbed Darren by the collar, wrestled him to the ground, and held him there until the cops arrived. Darren fought back, of course. He was bigger and stronger than Kyle, but Kyle wasn't going to let him scare him away. The whole thing was a blur, but the cops eventually showed up and arrested Darren for trespassing and harassment. Kyle didn't even look shaken afterward, but I could tell something about this whole situation had really shaken him up. I don't think he ever thought my ex would come back like that. I didn't either. Darren was gone for a while after that. The cops told us they had to let him go because there wasn't enough proof to keep him locked up, but they gave him a warning. The next few weeks were quiet. I almost thought it was over, but the peace didn't last. One night, when we were getting the kids ready for bed, the doorbell rang. It was like my heart stopped beating. I didn't want to answer it, but Kyle did. When he opened the door, it was Darren again, standing there, grinning like a maniac. This time, he wasn't aggressive. He was calm, almost too calm. He just stood there and said he was waiting for me to make the right decision, to leave Kyle and come back to him. He promised everything would be perfect. At this point, I was terrified. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get rid of him once and for all. We called the cops again, and this time they weren't taking any chances. Darren was arrested, but he swore this wouldn't be the last time we'd see him. They warned us that he might try to contact us again and to keep an eye out. I could feel my whole body tense whenever the doorbell rang after that. It was like I was waiting for the next shoe to drop. I'm still not sure what was going through Darren's head during all of this. Maybe he thought time would erase the fact that he was a psycho, or maybe he really thought we'd just pick up where we left off. What I do know is that I felt violated. My life, my family, my peace, it was all shattered by someone who couldn't take no for an answer. The worst part, we don't even know where Darren is now. After his last arrest, we didn't hear from him again. I have no idea if he's been in trouble with the law or if he's just hiding out. But every time I hear someone in the driveway, I get this sick feeling in my stomach, like he's still out there somewhere watching. It's been months, but I don't think I'll ever fully feel safe again. Darren was part of my past, but he's also this haunting reminder that some people never let go. I didn't think it would go down like this. I didn't think my ex Mia would even care that much after all the time that had passed. But I guess I underestimated her. Or maybe she just had something seriously wrong with her. Either way, it was a mess, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how crazy it all got. It all started a couple of months ago when I decided to start dating again. After everything with Mia, I wasn't exactly eager to jump back into the dating pool, but a friend set me up with a girl named Hannah. We had met a few times through mutual friends, but this was the first time we were going out just the two of us. I was excited but nervous at the same time. We went to a small cafe downtown, one of those cozy, trendy spots with a mix of low lighting, exposed brick walls, and indie music playing in the background. It seemed like the perfect place for a first date, Chill, relaxed, no pressure. Anna was super cool. We talked about music, our favorite movies, some random stuff, and things were going well. Honestly, it was nice to just sit there with someone who wasn't Mia, not to mention someone who didn't know about all the weird drama from my past. It was a clean slate. I wasn't expecting it to turn into some fairy tale date, but things were going smoothly and I could feel myself relaxing. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. I checked it. It was a text from Mia. I hadn't heard from her in months. At first, I thought maybe it was just one of those random, "Hey, how are you?" texts, but when I opened it, I could tell something was off. She'd sent me a string of messages, all one after another. Stuff like, "I saw you," and "Who's she?" Then there was one that said, "You don't get to move on like that." I froze. I looked up from my phone, and that's when I saw her, Mia, standing by the entrance of the cafe, staring directly at me. My heart sank. I didn't even have time to react before she saw me look up. She started heading straight toward our table, her eyes locked onto me like she was on a mission. Anna hadn't noticed yet. She was still scrolling through the menu, unaware of what was coming. I couldn't get my words out fast enough to warn her. Mia didn't waste any time. She didn't even say a word. She just walked straight up to Anna and without hesitation grabbed Anna's coffee and threw it at her, right at her face. It was like something out of a bad movie, honestly. The whole cafe went silent for a second as Anna screamed, wiping the coffee off her shirt and face. I could feel the heat rise in my neck, but I was too stunned to move at first. Anna looked at me, completely caught off guard, probably wondering if I even knew who this lunatic was. Mia didn't even blink. She just stood there, watching Anna's shocked face, waiting for some kind of reaction. "Is this your new girl?" Mia finally said, her voice low and icy. Anna, still in shock, was trying to clean herself up with a napkin, but the damage was done. The coffee had splashed all over her white shirt, and the cafe staff was already heading over at hell. I felt like I was going to die of embarrassment, but Mia didn't care. She was staring at me like I had personally betrayed her. It took a second for Anna to speak, but she didn't yell or anything. She just asked, "Who is she?" in a quiet voice, clearly trying to keep it together. But Mia wasn't about to make things easy. She turned to Anna, the grin on her face going from a cocky smirk to something darker. I could tell Mia was getting off on the whole situation. It was like she was trying to show that she still had some kind of power over me, that I was hers and no one could take that away. She was acting like this was some twisted game, and Anna was just a pawn in it. The thing is, Mia had always been like that. Possessive. Jealous. She couldn't stand the idea of me moving on, even though she had broken up with me. She had been the one to leave, but she never really let go. Not completely. I stood up then, finally snapping out of the shock. I had to do something. I went to apologize to Anna, but I wasn't sure how much I could say without making things worse. I didn't even know if Anna would want to be around after this. I stepped toward Mia, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mia, what the hell are you doing?" I was pissed, embarrassed, and honestly a little scared. Mia wasn't in her right mind. You could see it in her eyes. This wasn't about me or Anna. This was about her own issues, her need to control everything. Mia didn't answer me. She just turned and started walking out of the cafe, as if she hadn't just ruined everything. It took everything I had not to chase after her, but I didn't want to escalate it more. I went back to Anna, who was now looking at me like I had just dragged her into some personal horror show. I felt awful. I offered to help pay for the shirt, and I kept apologizing over and over, but I could tell Anna was already over it. She stood up, wiped some of the coffee off her face, and said she had to go. I didn't blame her. I wouldn't want to stick around either if I were her. She left without another word, and I was left standing there, my head spinning. What had just happened? Mia had always been unpredictable, but this felt different. It wasn't just her usual jealousy. It was something deeper, something more obsessive. I didn't hear from Mia for a while after that. The whole thing was so strange and unsettling, and I honestly didn't know what to do with myself. I figured it was over, just some insane outburst, and Mia would eventually get over it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time something like this would happen. Even after weeks, every time I went out or even thought about dating again, I couldn't shake that feeling. That knowing that Mia wasn't done. She had thrown her last punch, but she wasn't done with the fight. And I knew deep down that I was going to have to deal with her one way or another. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened with Pete. When we broke up, I thought it would be clean. We had been together for a couple of years, and sure, things hadn't been perfect. We fought a lot. I was always exhausted from the relationship, and eventually, I just knew it wasn't going anywhere. I ended it. Simple as that. But what came after was anything but simple. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I mean, we didn't exactly end on bad terms. There were no huge fights or screaming matches. Pete wasn't the kind of guy who would lose his temper or get violent. He just didn't seem like the type to be. Obsessed, but I was wrong. It started small, like the kind of thing you brush off. I came home one day, and there was a bouquet of roses on my doorstep. At first, I figured it was just a fluke. Maybe someone had mistaken my address, or maybe it was just a delivery mix-up. But then the flowers kept coming. Every day at the same time, a new set of flowers would show up. The guy at the florist knew my name by the third visit. It wasn't just flowers, though. After a couple of weeks, the letters started. At first, it was a simple, "I miss you," or "I'm thinking about you." But as the days went on, they got weirder. Pete would leave these notes telling me how much he needed me, how we were meant to be together, how no one could replace me. He would talk about our future, even though we hadn't even been dating for that long. It was like he had completely skipped the breakup in his mind. It was like he had built this version of us in his head that never ended. I remember feeling so uncomfortable every time I saw the flowers or read the notes. I even started throwing them away before anyone else could see. It was embarrassing, like I was being haunted by something I couldn't explain. And then one night it happened. I was getting ready for bed, scrolling through my phone when I heard knocking at my door. It was late, way too late for anyone to just be stopping by. My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to check the peephole. I knew it was Pete. I froze, not sure if I should answer or just pretend I wasn't home. But the knocking didn't stop. It went from knocking to pounding. I thought about calling the cops, but was too nervous. I wasn't sure if this was just a weird, harmless visit or if it was something worse. After a few minutes, I opened the door just a crack. And there he was, Pete, standing in the hallway, holding another bouquet of flowers, his face pale, eyes wide like he hadn't slept in days. He looked like a completely different person. I didn't even know what to say. I tried to act like I was just confused, like this was all some kind of misunderstanding, but it wasn't. I could tell the way his hands were shaking, the way his breath was coming in short bursts. I should have told him to leave. I should have slammed the door and called someone. But instead, I just stood there completely frozen. Then he started to cry. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there with his shoulders shaking and tears started rolling down his face. I'm not going to lie, I felt bad. It was hard not to feel sorry for him, even though I knew this wasn't healthy. But that's the thing about people like Pete. He wasn't violent. He wasn't mean. He just had this weird, intense neediness about him that could suck you in. It was hard to say no to him. I stepped back from the door, unsure of what to do. He followed me, just standing there at the threshold waiting. Please, he said, though I couldn't really hear him over his sobs, just give me another chance. I remember everything inside me just wanting to run away. I didn't want to be cruel, but I didn't want to lead him on either. It was like this battle in my head, trying to be nice while also trying to set boundaries. I told him we couldn't be together again, that it was over, that I was moving on. He didn't take that well. He dropped the flowers on the floor and started begging, crying harder now, asking me to take him back. His voice cracked as he told me how much he needed me, how he couldn't live without me. At that point, I was scared. He was out of control. I didn't know what he might do next. Finally, after what felt like forever, I closed the door. I heard him standing there for a while, sniffing, sobbing softly, but I couldn't open it again. I felt sick to my stomach, like I just witnessed something that wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't know if I was relieved or just completely horrified. I knew I had to end it once and for all, but part of me still felt guilty. Pete wasn't a bad person. He was just broken. After that night, things got worse. The flowers didn't stop. The letters kept coming. Sometimes he'd leave a note on my car. Other times, he'd just sit in his car outside my apartment, staring at my window. I tried changing my routine, hoping to throw him off, but it didn't matter. Pete was always there, lurking in the background like a shadow I couldn't shake. I started telling my friends about it, which felt like a huge weight lifted off my chest. They were supportive, but honestly, they were also a little freaked out. They wanted me to call the cops, but I wasn't sure. What if I was overreacting? What if it wasn't as serious as it seemed? But then one night, it escalated again. I had just gotten home from work when I found him standing outside my door again, holding another bouquet of roses. This time, though, he wasn't crying. He was just waiting. He looked at me with this empty look in his eyes. It wasn't sad. It wasn't angry. It was like he was resigned to this thing. This weird, twisted thing that he had built in his mind. It was like he'd already decided that we would be together no matter what. I told him to leave again. This time, I didn't open the door. I yelled through the window, hoping he would hear me and understand, but he didn't. He just stood there staring at me, his face completely unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he turned and left. And just like that, the flowers stopped. The letter stopped. The staring stopped. I never saw Pete again after that night, but I'll never forget how I felt. I'll never forget the helplessness, the fear, the guilt. It wasn't until much later that I realized just how close I had come to something much worse. Pete didn't want to move on. He didn't want me to move on. And when I finally shut the door, when I finally stood my ground, I think that's when he realized he didn't have control anymore. I still don't know what happened to him, and I'm not sure I want to. But I'll never forget the way it felt to be the one who was wanted so badly, but in the wrong way. The way it felt to be trapped in someone else's idea of a relationship. I learned that some breakups aren't just about moving on. They're about survival. I still can't fully wrap my head around what happened. I mean, the whole thing feels like some twisted version of a bad reality show. If you told me a year ago that my ex would end up marrying my mom and becoming my stepdad just to get back at me, I would have laughed it off. It sounded ridiculous, right? Like, how could someone go that far? But somehow Marcus did. And honestly, I think it messed with my head more than I realized. So let me start from the beginning. Marcus and I had been together for a couple of years. We were on and off, mostly because he was super clingy and just a bit too intense for me. I get it. Everyone has their issues, but Marcus had a way of turning everything into a drama. I tried to break up with him, and he guilt-tripped me or give me this sad puppy dog look until I cave. But this time was different. I'd finally had enough, so I broke up with him for good. Clean break, no back and forth. I thought that would be the end of it. It's not like I was that invested in the relationship. Sure, we had some good times, but he was always hovering, always making everything about himself. I didn't want that kind of energy in my life anymore. But of course, Marcus wasn't going to take no for an answer. The first few days after the breakup, things were relatively normal. I didn't hear from him, which honestly was a relief. But then I started seeing weird things. He'd show up at my job, hanging around outside, acting like he was just casually passing by. I caught him a few times and it made me uncomfortable, but he didn't confront me or anything. He'd just give me this weird look, like he was testing me to see if I'd make the first move. But then one day I went home and noticed something strange. My mom had been acting a little off lately too. She'd been talking about Marcus a lot, asking me how I felt about him and whether I thought he was a good guy. It seemed like an odd thing to bring up, especially after I'd just broken up with him. I thought maybe she was just being nice, trying to make sure I wasn't feeling bad or guilty about it, but deep down, something didn't sit right with me. A few weeks went by and Marcus kept showing up in random places. One time I ran into him at the grocery store. He was shopping with my mom. They were acting all normal, laughing, talking like they'd been friends for years. It was bizarre. I mean, he wasn't even pretending like there was any tension between us. It was as if the breakup never even happened. But I couldn't figure out why he was spending so much time with my mom. Eventually, things took a darker turn. I walked into the living room one evening to find my mom and Marcus sitting on the couch together. My mom was smiling at him like he was some kind of prince, and Marcus, well, he looked smug, like he was getting some sort of satisfaction from all this. My heart started racing, and I just had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. A few days later, my mom told me that she and Marcus were seeing each other. That's when the first wave of dread hit me. I remember sitting there, not knowing what to say. It felt like everything in my life was spinning out of control. How was this even happening? Why was she dating my ex? I couldn't understand it. It wasn't like they had even known each other that long, and yet here they were, acting like they were meant to be. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Maybe she was just trying to make me jealous or get back at me for the breakup. But no, it wasn't a phase. They got more serious. They went on trips together, spent more time at each other's places. And every time I tried to bring it up with my mom, she brushed me off like I was being dramatic. She'd tell me I should be happy for her, that she deserved to find someone who made her feel special. But I wasn't happy. How could I be? It felt like betrayal, like the worst kind of betrayal. And then the shocker came. One day, when I came home from work, I found a note on the kitchen table. It was from my mom, and she told me that she and Marcus were getting married. I couldn't breathe for a second. I thought I was going to pass out. My own mother was marrying my ex. It wasn't just weird. It was sick. It felt like everything I had worked so hard to get away from was being shoved in my face. I confronted her about it, but she just shrugged and said that Marcus made her happy, that he was good for her. I tried to explain how messed up it all was, how he was just trying to get back at me by marrying her, but she wouldn't listen. It was like she was blind to it. I mean, how could she not see it? Why was she so caught up in it? And why did Marcus even want to be with her? I could feel my frustration building up, and that's when I realized something even worse. Marcus didn't just want to be with my mom. He wanted to replace me. He was using her to get back at me. The whole thing was a twisted, sick game to him, and I was just a pawn in it. Eventually, the wedding happened. I didn't go. I couldn't. I couldn't watch my mom marry the guy who was supposed to be my past, my ex. It felt like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. It felt like my whole family had been flipped upside down, like I was living in someone else's life. The worst part of all of it wasn't just the marriage, though. It was the way Marcus started acting like he was the authority in my life. I couldn't go over to my mom's house without him being there. I couldn't have a normal conversation with her without him making some weird, passive-aggressive comment. It was like he was everywhere, creeping into every part of my life. He started calling me his daughter in this fake, overly sweet voice whenever he'd see me. I swear it was like he was trying to rewrite the whole damn family dynamic, making himself the center of it all. I didn't know how to handle it. I felt like I was trapped in a situation I couldn't escape. I wasn't just mad at Marcus, I was mad at my mom for letting it all happen. I mean, how could she marry the guy who was doing this just to get back at me? How could she let him take over everything? And here I am months later, still trying to figure out how I ended up in this nightmare. Marcus is my stepdad now. Every time I have to see him, it feels like I'm reliving the worst part of my life. He doesn't just play the role of a father figure. He makes sure I know who's in charge now. And it's not me, it's him. I can't escape him, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to fix this mess. The whole thing is so messed up that sometimes I just wake up and wonder if I'm still dreaming. But no, this is my reality now. My ex is my stepdad. And that's a twisted, sick truth I'll have to live with forever. I never thought I'd be the kind of person with a story like this. I always figured those crazy ex tales were exaggerated. Like the kind of stuff you hear and think, okay, sure, that's a little much. But trust me when I say that when your ex steals your car and tries to run you over, you stop laughing. Let me back up a bit. I'd been with Lydia for almost a year. Things were good in the beginning. At least, that's what I told myself. She was fun, spontaneous, a little wild, but in a way that seemed exciting. But the cracks started to show. She was unpredictable and not in the cool way. More like in the I'm going to throw a fit if you don't agree with me way. I won't lie, there were times I stayed in the relationship longer than I should have because I was afraid of what might happen if I ended it. Lydia had this way of making you feel guilty for breathing sometimes, and I didn't want to be the bad guy, so I stuck it out. It was clear that the breakup was coming. We weren't working anymore. I felt suffocated and like I was walking my eggshells around her. So one night, I did what I should have done weeks earlier. I ended it. I told her I couldn't do it anymore, that I needed space, that we weren't right for each other. She didn't take it well. I mean, I expected her to be upset, but I didn't think she would go full on crazy. The first couple of days after the breakup were surprisingly calm. She didn't try to contact me. I thought maybe she had just accepted it and was moving on. But then things started to get weird. One afternoon, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone when I heard a car outside. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then the engine revved like it was coming toward my driveway. I peeked out the window and I saw Lydia's face through the windshield, grinning like a maniac. My heart sank. She was in my car. I didn't know how or why, but there she was, sitting in the driver's seat, looking like she owned the place. I tried to tell myself it wasn't happening. Maybe it wasn't my car. Maybe I was just imagining it. But no, there she was staring right at me with that crazy smile. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I knew I needed to get out of the house. I grabbed my jacket, bolted out the door, and started running toward the driveway. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop her from doing something worse or just get my car back. I was hoping she'd snap out of it and leave, but no, she just kept grinning, revving the engine harder. When I was close enough, she slammed the pedal to the floor, and the car shot toward me like it was aiming right for me. I froze. I couldn't believe what was happening. My brain couldn't catch up to my body. I barely managed to jump to the side in time, feeling the gust of wind as the car missed me by inches. I was shaking, panicked, and pissed all at once. Lydia slammed on the brakes, and I thought for a second it was over, that she was done. But then she backed up. She wasn't done. She was coming at me again. This time, I didn't just freeze, I ran. I darted for the side of the house, barely making it behind the fence just in time. She was laughing now. It was this loud, manic laugh that echoed in my head long after the car passed by. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't even sure if I was still processing everything. But I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking. But I managed to tell them what had happened, how my ex had stolen my car and tried to run me over. It told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. But honestly, it felt like an eternity before they actually showed up. The whole time I was waiting, I could hear the engine revving again. Leah wasn't done, and I knew it. I could feel my whole body tensing up, bracing for whatever was coming next. My mind was racing. What if she came back and actually did hit me? What if she wasn't planning on stopping this time? It felt like forever before I saw the blue lights flashing down the street. When the cops finally pulled up, they didn't waste any time. They got out of the car, approached me, and immediately started asking questions. As I told them everything that had happened, I kept glancing at my car. I wasn't sure if Lydia was still inside it or if she had driven off again. But then I saw her. She was standing by the car, staring at me like she didn't even care. When the officers tried to approach her, she didn't make any move to get away. It was almost like she wanted them to arrest her. They were calm, trying to talk to her, but she wasn't having it. Lydia just stared at them with that same twisted smile, like she was daring them to do something. One of the officers stepped forward and told her she was under arrest. That's when the real chaos started. Lydia didn't scream or cry. She didn't even look shocked. Instead, she started shouting at me. She told me I was ruining her life, that I had no idea how much she loved me, that I didn't know how much I meant to her. But that didn't matter anymore. The cops didn't even let her finish before they handcuffed her and put her in the back of the squad car. I was just standing there trying to breathe and make sense of everything. I had never thought it would go this far. I had never thought she would steal my car, let alone try to run me over. But here we were. The cops asked me a few more questions, took my statement, and told me they'd take care of the rest. Lydia was arrested for theft and attempted assault, though I still don't know exactly what charges they ended up filing against her. I didn't stick around long enough to find out. After everything had calmed down, I just wanted to get out of there. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove off. I couldn't shake the image of her face, that manic grin as she came at me in the car. I still don't really understand why she did it, but I know that she wasn't the same person I fell for. Maybe I never really knew her at all. It's been a few months since that day, and I still get nervous every time I see a car pulling into my driveway. I don't know if Lydia will show up again, but I'm always watching, always on edge. It's one of those things you don't think will happen until it does. And when it does, you realize you'll never feel safe again. Not with her, at least. I don't think she'll ever come after me again, but I'll never forget the day my ex tried to kill me with my own car. It was the last time I ever let myself get sucked into something like that. Some people really are capable of anything. I've never been so freaked out in my life. To this day, I still get nervous when I hear someone yell in the street. Jasmine, my ex, well, she took things to a whole other level after we broke up. I honestly never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am trying to process what happened. So, here's the deal. Jasmine and I were together for about 8 months. It was one of those whirlwind relationships. At first, everything was cool. We'd laugh, do fun stuff together, and honestly, it felt like we were pretty good for each other. But like most relationships, it started to show signs of going south. Looking back, I can see how things weren't healthy, but when you're in it, you don't always notice. Jasmine was intense, She'd get super jealous over little things, always wanted to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. At first, I thought it was cute, but after a while, it just felt exhausting. She'd accuse me of stuff I wasn't doing, always wanting more of my time and attention than I was comfortable giving. Eventually, I realized I was just trying to keep the peace instead of actually enjoying my time with her. So, I did what I thought was the right thing and broke up with her. We were sitting in her apartment, and I told her I just couldn't keep going like this. I was burned out and I needed space. She cried, of course, and begged me to stay, but it was clear to me that the relationship wasn't healthy anymore, and I wasn't about to let it drag on. I thought it would be a clean break. No drama, no weirdness. I thought it would just be like, okay, we're done, and now we move on. Big mistake. The first couple of days after the breakup were pretty calm. She didn't text me or call. I figured she was processing it, giving me space. I was relieved, honestly. It felt like I could breathe again. But then one morning, I got a call from my friend Ben. He was freaking out, asking if I was okay. I had no idea what he was talking about. He told me to check the local news. I got on the website, and the headline made my stomach drop. Woman running wild in the streets, blames ex for breakdown. I stared at it, thinking, that can't be her. But then I clicked the article, and there she was, Jasmine, running around in the middle of the street, half naked, screaming at people. It was like something out of a horror movie, only I knew it was real. She was in her underwear, her hair a mess, shouting random stuff at strangers. The article mentioned that people had tried to calm her down, but she just kept yelling, and at one point, she even blocked traffic. The police had been called, but by the time they showed up, she had already run off down the street. It was clear she wasn't in a good state of mind. My heart dropped. I didn't know what was going on, but I could guess that she was taking the breakup pretty hard. What I didn't expect was that she was literally blaming me for everything. In the article, she said that I had destroyed her life, and that was the reason she was in this mental breakdown. And that was just the beginning. Over the next couple of days, it got worse. I started getting messages from random people I didn't know, friends of hers, I guess, telling me how evil I was for breaking her heart. I had a couple of people message me calling me a heartless jerk, and I started getting these weird, panicked texts from my own friends. Apparently, Jasmine had been running around the neighborhood, knocking on doors, telling anyone who listened how I ruined her life. Some people even said she was showing up to their houses at 3 in the morning, just standing outside, yelling my name. That was when it started to get a little unsettling. It was like she wasn't just sad or heartbroken, she was obsessed. She was latching onto this idea that I had completely wrecked her, and she couldn't let go of it. One night, I was sitting at home, just trying to forget about everything, when I heard a loud bang on my door. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late. When I went to the door, I saw Jasmine, standing there, shaking, looking completely out of it. She was still in her underwear, but this time she had a jacket on, and her hair was messy, like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, watching her through the peephole. She was muttering to herself, pacing back and forth. I was terrified. I didn't know what she was going to do, but I had a bad feeling. I didn't want to get involved in whatever was happening with her, but at the same time, I didn't know how to deal with it. I called my best friend Alex to let them know what was happening. By the time I was talking to Alex, Jasmine had stopped pacing and was now just standing there, staring at my door like she was waiting for something to happen. I could hear her whispering my name over and over. That was enough for me to panic. I didn't want to deal with her right now, not in this state, so I called the police. I didn't know what else to do. Within minutes, the police showed up. I felt a little relieved that someone else was there, but at the same time, I felt horrible. Jasmine wasn't getting any better. She was getting worse, and I wasn't sure what would happen next. The officers went up to her, and it was clear right away that she was in no condition to be outside like that. They tried to talk to her, but she wasn't having it. She kept saying that I had ruined her, that I was the cause of everything that had gone wrong in her life. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges, but honestly, I was too freaked out to even think straight. I just wanted her to go away to get the help she needed. They ended up taking her to the station for her safety. From what I heard later, she was taken to a psychiatric facility to get checked out. I don't know what happened to her after that. I don't know if she ever got the help she needed, but I know that it changed everything for me. That whole situation left me feeling paranoid and confused. I'd never expected things to go that far. It was just a breakup, not a freaking disaster. But somehow, Jasmine couldn't see it that way. She couldn't let go, and it spiraled into something I still can't fully understand. So yeah, that's the story. My ex went completely nuts after we broke up. Ran through the streets in her underwear, screaming at people, blaming me for everything. I didn't want any part of it, but it felt like it followed me wherever I went for a while. It was one of those times in life where you just wish you could wake up and have it all be a bad dream. So I thought I'd seen it all. But then my ex-Mason showed me exactly how far someone can go when they can't accept a breakup. It wasn't like he was a crazy person to start with, but damn, did he turn into something I couldn't recognize. What happened after we split still gives me chills, and honestly, I don't think I'll ever forget it. Let me set the stage. Mason and I had been together for almost 2 years, and like most relationships, we started out strong. He was funny, charming, and seemed to care about me in a way that felt genuine. But as time went on, things started to feel off. It wasn't anything major at first, just little things. He'd get possessive over dumb stuff, like who I was hanging out with or where I was going. And when I didn't check in enough, he'd get upset. Eventually, it felt like I was walking on eggshells around him. I hated it. Breaking up with him was one of the hardest decisions I ever made. I thought I could handle it, that it would be one of those clean breaks, but Mason didn't take it well, at all. It started the day after the breakup. I woke up to a string of texts from him. Nothing weird at first, just typical I miss you stuff. But then the calls started coming. At first, I ignored them, thinking he'd cool off. But no, he kept calling. Over and over. I didn't pick up, but I had this uneasy feeling in my stomach. I couldn't just ignore it forever, so I finally blocked his number. I thought that would do it. Wrong. That night, I got a knock at my door. I didn't expect anyone, and when I looked through the window, I saw Mason standing there. He was just standing there, staring at my door like he was waiting for something to happen. At first, I thought it might be a coincidence. Maybe he was just passing by. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wasn't the case. The knocking kept going, harder this time, more insistent. I didn't answer, obviously, but I could hear him outside, calling my name quietly at first, then louder. I just stood there in my living room trying to figure out what to do. Should I call the cops? Should I let him in and try to talk? But no, this wasn't just some misunderstanding. He wasn't trying to talk. He was trying to convince me to come back. That night, I ended up texting one of my friends, telling them what was happening. They suggested I just call the police, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I figured if I ignored him long enough, he'd leave. Eventually he did. But this wasn't the end of it. The next day, Mason came back. I thought maybe he would have moved on, but no, he knocked again. And again, and again. It didn't stop. He was obsessed with getting me back, and it was freaking me out. At this point, I was too scared to open the door. I started keeping the lights off, hiding behind the couch, hoping he wouldn't see me through the window. But it didn't matter. Every day, without fail, Mason was there. Some days it was just the knocking. Other days, he'd leave little things on my doorstep, flowers, letters, notes written in that messy handwriting of his. He even started calling me at work trying to talk to me, asking if I would just listen to him. It wasn't just the constant knocking and the creepy gifts. It was the way he looked at me through the window like he was watching me. I started to feel like I couldn't even leave my house without looking over my shoulder. I was constantly worried he would be lurking somewhere. The worst part was that I couldn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound like I was overreacting. I didn't want to seem like the kind of person who couldn't handle a breakup. But the longer it went on, the more I realized this wasn't normal. One night, I had enough. I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I heard that familiar knock at my door. This time, I decided to confront him. I wasn't going to let him keep doing this to me. I walked over to the door, opened it just enough to see him standing there, with that same sad, pleading look on his face. He told me again that he loved me and that I was making a mistake. He promised things would change, but I didn't want to hear it. I told him to leave. He didn't leave. Instead, he stood there just staring at me. It felt like an eternity, and I could feel myself getting more and more freaked out. It wasn't just a breakup anymore. It was like I had become a prisoner in my own home. He wouldn't go away, no matter how many times I told him to. The next week, Mason did something that took things to a whole new level. He found out where I work. I don't know how he figured it out, but one morning I walked out to my car and saw him standing there. He wasn't doing anything weird, just standing there in the parking lot waiting for me. It was like he knew exactly when I'd leave for work, and he was there watching. I tried to ignore him, but it was impossible. Every day he was there. I had to start taking different routes to work, changing my schedule just to avoid him. But still, no matter what I did, he was always there. And then it happened. One night, I was at home trying to relax when I heard something that made my heart stop, the knocking again. I stood up, looked through the window, and there he was, just standing in front of my door, looking at me with that same obsessive gaze. This time, though, there was something different in his eyes. He wasn't pleading anymore. He was angry. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the cops? Should I confront him again? But I couldn't take it anymore. I was terrified. I finally decided to call my sister. She rushed over to stay with me that night, and when Mason knocked again, we called the police. It felt like a relief finally doing something about it. They showed up, but by the time they got to my place, Mason was gone. After that, I thought maybe it was finally over. But I still kept looking over my shoulder. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there watching me. I didn't know if he would ever truly leave me alone. Eventually, he did. He disappeared, and I haven't heard from him since. But the whole thing changed me. I don't trust easily anymore. I still lock my doors at night, check the windows when I'm home, and make sure no one's following me when I leave. It's been a while now, but I still can't shake the memory of Mason's obsessive behavior. The way he couldn't let go, it still makes me sick to my stomach thinking about it. So yeah, that's my story. How my ex stalked me for a month and turned my life upside down. I just hope no one else ever has to deal with something like that.